Welcome to the Crackin Backs Podcast, where today we sat down to talk about the extraordinary journey of Robert Cord Beatty. From the disciplined life of a retired Marine to the dazzling heights of working with the legendary Stan Lee, Cord's story is one of unparalleled highs, yet it's also a tale of harrowing lows, losing it all to addiction, becoming homeless, and laying on death's door as his organs began shutting down, with the doctors giving up and leaving him with one word: pray. He woke up after surviving the night, and at 46, with nothing but a few dollars from his parents, Cord's quest to change led him to the serene mountains of Tibet, where he embarked on a path of self-discovery and recovery, even climbing to the top of the world, Mount Everest. Returning to the States with a renewed purpose, Cord had revolutionized addiction treatment, opening several treatment centers to help others find their way back. Today, Cord shares his insights on conquering life's Everest, finding purpose amidst despair, and redefining addiction. Join us as we explore the depths of human resilience and the power of transformation with Robert Cord Beatty.
All right. Thank you, Cord, for being part of our show, for hanging with us today. Off air, I was talking to our current episode guest, Matt Blanchard, and he goes, dude, you've got to talk to this guy. My job is on the ground. He's a great storyteller, but what a ride this man has had in his life. So I can't dig into this incredible, colorful painting that we're going to call your life. So thank you for agreeing on such short notice to come on board and share your journey with us.
Pleasure to be here, guys. Pleasure to be here.
All right. So I got to start off before we get into the nitty gritty of the show. I got to start off because I'm a huge Stan Lee fan. And I heard that a rumor is that you used to work with the man, and one of the coolest men on the planet, this great man called Stan Lee of Marvel Comics. And can you just, before we go into other stuff, just tell me what that was like working with that kind of a genius and what you did for him?
Stan was the man. I used to kid around with Stan a little bit. I used to kid around that he was not from this planet. Like, I figured the man would never die. And I remember walking down Santa Monica Boulevard, going into his office over there, because I hung out down there at POW Entertainment a lot. And he wasn't there, and I went over to Starbucks to get a Starbucks, and I turn around and Stan's walking down the street. He's 94 years old. He's walking down the street with a roll of toilet paper in his hand, heading towards his office. And I said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I don't use their toilet paper. This is how I get my exercise. My daily exercise is walk from here to CVS Pharmacy, get my roll of toilet paper, and go back." And that was just sense of humor, man. But I tell you what it was like to work with the man. Stan and I created a superhero series called Legion of Five, if you Google it. Brighton Partners was my company, and we co-developed in partnership this superhero series that was Legion of Five, classic Stan Lee stuff, just good guys and bad guys and world dominance, and good overcoming evil. That's what his entire persona in life was about. But Stan was a man that, in fact, I'll turn my camera a little bit so you can see it. This painting that you see on the wall there, that's all the Marvel characters, and Stan is in the corner of that painting. I've got a picture of him, and I painted this. I painted this painting as a gift from Stan, and everything that he did, everything that he talked about, somehow, some way, had a joke involved in it, and it was just almost exhausting to be around him, and that you could not have a conversation. There was no meaningful conversation because everything turned into a joke. And this painting, to give you a scope of this, a friend of mine and I co-painted this painting together, a guy named Chad Bailey. And we paint this thing for Stan. We took it down there for his birthday, and gave it to him as this gift. And behind Stan on the wall was this awful, hideous rendition of Spider-Man on a white canvas. And I didn't realize he had painted this. And it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And I'm a painter in my part-time, and so I was critiquing it one day. I was just going, I don't know who painted this, but it's just awful. And he never said anything. And I didn't know he painted it. So, but I had painted this thing and give it to him for his birthday. And he puts the painting on the floor. In fact, there's some images I'll email you of him doing this for that you could roll over on this podcast. But he puts it on the floor in his office, takes a Sharpie, and he signs the bottom of the painting, Stan Lee. And I'm like, he stood up and we're standing there, and I said, like, dude, did you just sign our painting? Did you just sign your name to our painting? And he looked straight at me and he said, you don't think for a minute that I would let anyone think that I didn't paint this. And he took his hideous painting off the wall, and we hung this beautiful painting that you see in my office now behind his desk. And it became quite a joke around there. But everything that he did was in that light. He lived his life to the fullest extent of nothing but joy and happiness in every single thing that he did. He had the most charmed life of living in laughter. That's what I used to say about Stan, is the man lived in absolute joy and laughter 24 hours a day, 7 days. It didn't matter whether he was sick or he wasn't. He was laughing, always laughing.
So how does a journey from working in that environment, can you talk about how your life started to take a turn? And so we can get into some of the meat of this, but you went from this rags to riches thing, but you kind of, you're around a man that likes to laugh and good versus evil. Let's talk about your journey a little bit.
Well, I for years I built a career in television and in the production world. Post my military career, I think the military career may have had some bearing on some of it. Maybe I could point to some things that did affect me, but more importantly, what I didn't know about myself in my early adulthood was that I suffered from a genetic disorder, and that I had a disease that was prevalent in my genetic design, and the disease of addiction was prevalent, and that because of that, I had a form of mental illness that I had not really identified or dealt with or had to deal with. I never had a drink of alcohol until I was about 35. But addiction is a real disease. It is a form of mental illness that has co-occurring disorders with it. Substance abuse has a co-occurring disorder of depression. It has co-occurring disorder of anxiety. It has co-occurring disorder of behavioral health issues such as OCD or ADD is prevalent in addiction. And someone who's really truly suffering from addiction, from the disease of addiction, suffers from a myriad of other disorders that are mental health issues. And the downward spiral of that for any addict, I'm no different, is a slow progressing, burning downfall till you get to a place that I call the desperation of the dying man. In fact, I have 2 books that are keen. I've written 4 books on the subject of overcoming mental health issues and substance abuse. One of them is called How Free Do You Want to Be, which is a spiritual-based book. The other one is called Desperation of the Dying Man. And the Desperation of the Dying Man is an exploration of this ever-eluding bottom that we talk about. You hear people say, well, he hasn't hit his bottom yet. what is it going to take for him to hit the bottom, right? And so I'm no different. I suffered from a disease that was taking me on a journey through my years in film and television and through that career towards the downward spiral, the consistent, ever daunting, ever never-ending spiral into an abyss of an illusion of the eluding desperation or the eluding bottom. And for me, everybody's different. For me, it took, I'm a hardcore guy, military veteran. I'm a Marine. I'm not going to quit drinking. I'll never quit drinking. And but jokes aside, it for me it was different because it took me losing my career, losing my family, losing my home, my assets, my livelihood, being locked out of my house one day while they locked up my home, being actually homeless, and it's an interesting thing to go through when you are a real addict, when you're the real deal, an addict alcoholic, and you're the real thing, and it is a genetic issue. This ever eluding bottom that we talk about is always self-medicated through the use of drugs or alcohol, right? And that's the course of business for the addict alcoholic. So you instead of hitting a bottom, what you hit is you hit an acceptable new low that's actually acceptable from the use of a medication, of a self-medication that helps you cope with the acceptable new low. So losing a home becomes acceptable. Losing, maybe I don't need a home. Maybe I can live in a hotel. Losing your cars. Maybe I don't need my cars. Maybe I can take the bus. I've got this alcohol and I've got this drug and I can self-medicate, so I'll be okay. And then losing my family. Well, if that's really their decision, maybe I don't really need my family. I can medicate that away. And losing my health. Maybe I don't really need to. Maybe I don't really care if I'm here or not. And you're on this downward, spiral of this acceptable new low, until you hit ultimately what is called the unacceptable new low, and it's generally something very, very catastrophic. For me, jail was not a deterrent. That didn't deter me. Loss of career didn't deter me. Loss of family, divorce, bankruptcy, none of that deterred me from the ever-pressing issue of addiction. And so as I go down this spiral over a period of several years, about 7 years, 2 of which I spent homeless on the streets of Salt Lake City, using alcohol, using heroin, using everything I could get my hands on, that I finally hit a place that was an unacceptable new low. It was a place where my health had deteriorated. I'm a 190, 200-pound guy. I work out in the gym every day. I stay fit and physically fit, and I'm in great shape as a 62-year-old guy. But 14 years ago, I find myself 130 pounds, emancipated, just completely so sick that I have a liver that has completely failed, and it's caused a heart attack and then a heart failure, esophagealitis, pancreatitis, and kidney failure, and I am on my way out. So, for me, that was the unacceptable new low that I had never experienced until that day. Being in a hospital for the umpteenth time and being in an ICU unit and being hooked up to a lot of gadgets and tubes and draining fluid out of my body and listening to a doctor tell me that I would not survive the day, that today was the day. And, you look back on those things and I remember that day very clearly because the only thing that I had a doctor tell me that made any sense at all when I said, what do I do now? What do I do with this? is he said, you pray. That's the only advice I can give you. And he walks out of the room. He said, pray, and puts my chart down and walks out of the room, leaves me alone. And, he had told me to call my children and to bring them to me. And I couldn't do it. I told him, it's just not within me to do that, to put my kids through that. So at that point, Maddie and I share this sentiment together. We talk about it a lot. He's such a good guy because he's been through. I look at his situation and I go, "Oh, he's had a lot worse than I have." And he looks at my situation and my history and he goes, "Man, I can't believe he went through all that." And but we had lunch the other day and we were joking about this very issue of this unacceptable low. And in that place, there's a lot of fear in that place, and that fear is not of dying. It is of living another day. And what is my life like? What does this look like? What happens to me at this point? What does my physical life look like? How do I recover from this? And so I don't want to live. But three things happen in that place in the desperation of a dying man. For everybody who suffers from issues like this, it doesn't have to be just addiction. It could be, physical issues like Matt Blanchard. Happened for him too. And those three things that happen are first an admittance of the desperation of that, or the powerlessness of that very situation, and then an acceptance of that being your fate, meaning what you have brought to yourself to the fate of that, and then a surrender, because there's nothing else to do, right? And so you surrender to prayer, you surrender to higher power, you surrender to Buddha, Allah, Jesus Christ, Spirit of the universe, white light, energy. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what that is. Fundamentally, it's something for everybody, even an atheist. When I was in the military, they told me there was no atheists in a foxhole. And I can tell you for fact that is a true statement. And I've been in both situations, and I can tell you for fact that is a true statement. That fundamentally, in that situation, we will fundamentally reach for and grasp for something greater than I to take me off this earth, to alleviate me of this pain, to take me out of this situation. So for me, that's what it took. And of course, I did fundamentally the only thing that I could do, and I prayed. And I never done that. I had never experienced that before. And 5 days later, I walked out of this hospital, and my mother was a registered nurse, retired in southern Utah, and I called her up and asked her if I could come home. And of course, she said, if as long as you're sober and you're not using her, I didn't tell her what had happened. She had no idea. And she said, how do you get here? I can't come and get you. You're 5 hours from us. And I said, I'll get there. And I hitchhiked home. And so, over the next year, I began this process of healing. I knew that I was not going to die. I had a really clear understanding that was not my fate, that I was not going to die from this, that I was going to survive this, at least for some period of time. And I ran into a doctor in St. George, amazing man named Dr. Wilcox, amazing guy. And we started doing intravenous stem cell work, intravenous therapies. He had some concoctions that my body absolutely responded to in a way that I had never seen it respond to anything. And a year later, a year past that, and I'm running 8 miles a day. I'm running from New Harmony, Utah to the freeway, and back. It's about 4 miles out, 4 miles back, and I'm doing about 8 miles a day and running. I'm doing 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 pull-ups a day. I'm just in this physical condition that I had no idea I was going to happen, and yet I'm still suffering from some of the effects of what I had done, but well on my way. And and from there, my journey took me to Nepal. I went to Nepal and spent an inordinate amount of time in Nepal, studying spirituality, studying a lot of scripture. Ran into some folks over there that educated me on Buddhism, from Hinduism, Buddhism, and the Christianity that they believed in, which lined up with some of my own core beliefs. But spent a lot of time over there at a monastery in the village of Tame, and got into climbing, and just was on this journey of absolute health and healing, and still had no idea what I was going to do. I I remember this senior lama at the monastery in Tame, which is a beautiful monastery. Sits up on this cliff at about 17,000 feet. And if you get a picture of it, take a look at it. Incredible place. And I was standing out there, and there's these little, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old monk children in their red robes. I called them chickmunks, and they were out there kicking a ball around with me. And the senior lama, he came out. He was a guy that spoke really very good English. He'd gone educated in the U.S. and went back to take this position. And he said, "What's on your mind?" And I said, "I think I'm going to leave because I'm not getting anything out of being here. This prayer meditation journey that I'm on is not really working for me."
How old were you at this time?
And, 47 years old. Yeah, 46.
And you had no money when you went there, didn't you? Or very little? Is that what I heard?
I went there with $200 in my pocket, and my backpack and my sleeping bag, and wanted to be in the I don't know why. I just always wanted to go to Nepal. I wanted to go to the Himalayas. But I'll tell you something about the Himalayas, guys. It is that place, especially if you're alone and you're able to do that, is a very, very spiritual place to be. It's humbling, to be walking amongst peaks that are literally 5 miles high, and you're walking in between them on your way through the Himalayas, on the way up to Tame, to Base Camp Everest. And I just, it was a time of my life. It was the best time. It was the best, absolutely best experience, best time of my life, because it gave me this time for retrospect where I could really analyze my selfishness. I could stare at the face of the dishonesty of my life, and what kind of a person I had become, and this awful individual that no one wanted to be around, and I was alone, and yet I was the happiest I'd ever been in my life, because I was alone in the Himalayas, connected spiritually, connected through prayer, meditation, and just enjoying like every minute of it, and gave me some time to think about what I was going to do as a career, and I made a decision while I was over there that I was going to spend the rest of my life somehow, some way, educating people on a better way to overcome addiction, mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and even relationship issues, and other health issues. And that's what I do today.
Robert, let me ask you, you've overcome some pretty big obstacles in reality and figuratively. You climbed Mount Everest, yes? Is that true?
2012. Yeah, we went to Mount Everest. 2012. I've summited the sister peaks of Everest of Island Peak as well. Gone to Island Peak. Still have a couple on my radar that I'd like to do.
Did
Alma de Blanc. I'd like to go back.
did those serve as a metaphor for overcoming some of the obstacles personally in your life?
Yeah. Great question, because somebody with mental illness, alcoholics, addicts, somebody with real alcoholism, real addiction, real mental illness, even to the extreme of mental illness. These guys are climbing mountains every day. I mean, every day is a daunting marathon of trying to climb out of this abyss of the hole they're in.
Yeah.
And so my thought was, if I can do this, anybody could do this. Like, if I could do this, it's really a matter of setting your sights on something and becoming healthy, living healthy, and not using drugs, not using any form of self-medication, and actually dedicating yourself to a better life, and showing people by example that anything's possible.
So, after all that, what was your purpose, and how did you come to understand that purpose?
Well, I knew I wanted to do something in addiction services. I knew that I did not want to go back to the film and television world, and so I went back to school. To get educated. Went back to school to finish a master's degree. Psychology and addiction was the direction that I went. I wanted to understand the psychology of my own addiction, and so I went back to school to educate myself, and took an undergraduate course in divinity. And my thought was, I'm either going to be a minister or a therapist.
Right. Which is both, yeah.
And I tried both.
Yeah.
And there's what I found out was that there was very little money in being a minister.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of financial suffering that was going to go on there. And so, being a therapist was a great is a great living. But I'm an entrepreneur, and I was not going to sit still very, very long behind a desk with a clipboard listening to people. I knew that, and so it didn't. It was a natural gravitation. It didn't take me very long at all to make a decision that I was going to open an inpatient treatment center for mental health and substance abuse issues, and I did that. I put the money together with some people, some friends, and we opened a treatment center in Park City, Utah, and that treatment center was called New You Recovery, and it was basically a women's only program. And I had a great counselor, a lady named Marcia Stafford, that was partnered up with me on that, and she really had she's a great lady. She really had a mastery at teaching these people the principles of overcoming addiction, and so I learned a lot from her. We sold that, and I took my money, and I purchased a piece of property in southern Utah and started a company called The Retreat at Zion, right near Zion National Park. And it's an inpatient treatment program that treats mental health and substance abuse. And then I took what I was developing there, refining what I was doing there, and developed an outpatient treatment program called the brand that you see here, Zion Healing Centers. And Zion Healing Centers is an outpatient program that treats substance abuse, mental health issues, depression specifically. We're centric to depression and PTSD, trauma related. We use transcranial magnetic stimulation as a form of our therapy modality. We use QEEG, brain mapping, QEEG, and neurofeedback therapy as a modality that's part of our program, not one versus the other. It's all part of our program. And we run people through about a 7 to 8 week course on the education of mental illness, the education of substance abuse, the history of it, why they have it genetically, uh, what it's done to them, helping them understand what it's done to them. And then I developed a video course called, because of a production background, I developed a video course to go with it called 15 Promises to Freedom that has 42 educational videos and worksheets that's very well done, that takes an individual from a point of no education in this all the way through to a place where they have not only understand their disease, understand how to overcome it, understand how to live with it, and keep it in remission for the rest of their life. And we use that technology to take the underlying depression and anxiety away from them. And because of that, we have an extremely high success rate. And currently we have 22 offices nationwide, and we're growing. We market the only behavioral health, fully licensed behavioral health franchise in the U.S. Chairman of my board, and the guy that's helping me lead this is a guy named Jim Amos, who was Jim is the founder of UPS stores and mailboxes, etc. Fellow Marine, combat veteran, hell of a guy.
That's great.
Just a hell of a guy, and a wealth of information on franchise. And he's helping us take this and develop it nationwide.
What are you most proud of at this point?
Most proud of the fact that I think I would be most proud of not the financial success of it. I'm most proud of the fact that I have been an instrument in assisting hundreds and hundreds of people, to freedom. Watching families come together and children and their parents come back together and actually participating in that patient journey it's what I'm most proud of.
Oh, that's great. There's positive addiction, there's negative addictions that we just spoke of, and then there's positive addictions like going to the gym or having compulsions to do what we typically would imagine are positive things that become a compulsion. What is your take on addictions?
Well, it's addiction. I firmly believe that addiction comes in all forms of the disease, hoarding, shopping,
Yeah.
sex addictions, obsessionality, to people that become very obsessed. I watch people go from addiction for alcoholism, for instance, to going to an extreme of using steroids and being competitive bodybuilders in the gym, and that's still an obsessionality. It's still they're trading one for the other, and so I think that drug of choice for the addict, the alcoholic, the addict, is really drug of choice no matter what you latch onto. And anything other than good health, spirituality, connection, good things that are healthy like prayer, meditation, things like that are still obsessionality. It's still a piece of your disease that's hanging on and probably needs to be looked at.
Is there a most remarkable component to like a protocol that you may have installed in your programs that seems to be working best for you guys?
Yeah. One of the greatest tools in our history, in the history of mental illness and substance abuse, I think one of the greatest assets and the greatest tools that was ever written was written in 1934, and it was called the 12 Steps. And the 12 Steps were never written by Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. Those organizations adopted the principles of the 16 authors that wrote the principles of that. Then they expanded on it. The principles actually came from a Christian minister named Frank Buckman in 1909. And they had a concept, and the concept was that we could overcome any form of mental illness or addiction through a spiritual connection to a higher power, whatever you call that, right?
Hmm.
Um, Whatever makes sense to you. It doesn't need to make sense to anyone but you. And it is a tremendous tool, uh, one that is not available, and it is not taught in any AA organization, NA organization.
Hmm.
Treatment centers don't teach it. They teach basics of the principles of that. Uh, we are different. We teach all of it from start to finish. We take people through each individual step as it was meant to be, to where they have a spiritual experience, they have an enlightenment, if you will, they have a psychic change, they have a change in the way that they think about their disease or think about their lives. And we go all the way through that. We don't bounce around and play with it. We dig in and we work in it every single day.
Is
And
that
it's real
because
work.
it's a? Oh, sorry. Is
Go
it
ahead.
because you, is it because you started out originally by saying a disease, and you would, I guess, imagine it as a genetic condition, and so how do you overcome something that's so deeply part of your biology?
Uh, we treat it. You treat it like any other disease.
Hmm.
If if I was told by an oncologist today that I have cancer,
Yeah.
I'm certainly not going to just live with it. I'm going to figure out what it takes to put that in remission,
Yeah.
right? If I have a doctor tell me I have multiple sclerosis today, and that's why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, I certainly am not just going to do nothing about it. I'm going to Google how to put multiple sclerosis into remission. And yet, we as a society we treat addiction and mental illness different than that,
Hmm.
as a social issue or a choice, right? It is not. I've been challenged on that a lot. I've had doctors and friends and other therapists that don't believe the way that I believe, that they don't believe that addiction is a real disease. My
Hmm.
only response to that guy is a simple one, and is that the insurance industry, if you could
Hmm.
prove that, would pay you a tremendous amount of money to prove that theory, that it is not a disease, because then they would not have to reimburse it. And they spent 37 billion reimbursing it last year. So if I had the proof
Wow.
of that, I bet you I could pick up a couple of $1 billion from them just to make that proof happen, and and to make that a reality. Um, so it is a real disease. That's a given. It's been deemed a real disease by the American Medical Association, and it's treated as such. So why do we treat addiction and mental illness any differently than we treat cancer, multiple sclerosis, diabetes, Lou Gehrig's, or any other disease? We need to strive to educate ourselves, educate our people, educate the children, educate the people with this disease, that there is a way to put it into remission and keep it there. And that's what we teach, you know.
So you've been through s- quite a few uh, dramatic transitions in your life. The rock bottom and the high high. Um, what would that superpower be that you have? Now we're channeling Stan Lee. If he was if he was going to create a character out of you, what would your superpower be to overcoming some of the deepest, darkest obstacles?
Uh, for me, it's prayer, it's meditation, it's I think that prayer without meditation is like praying for something that you don't really want. Um, and so I think I don't think it's not religion. For me, it is not a religious thing. I think that I have a theory on that. I firmly believe, personally believe that religion is for a lot of people that might be afraid of going to hell, and spirituality is for the rest of us that have already been there. And so I think that anyone doesn't necessarily need the four walls of a church to find a connection to something greater than themselves. I think it's through a simple prayer and meditation, written meditation, where you could write down the things that you're receiving in your meditation that you're listening for. I look up the word meditation in the English dictionary. It means to listen in our language. So if I'm praying for an answer to something that is really troubling me, all I really need to do is take a piece of paper and start writing down what I'm receiving in a silent meditation over a period of time. And then I need the tools to be able to analyze that and know the difference between what's coming from here and what's coming from there. And I can look at where I need to go. And we teach that principle here.
So if there was a character that I imagine you being, it would probably be David Carradine as Kwai Chang Caine, huh? For those of us who remember who that is,
you just isolated a quarter of the population right there by that. Yeah,
because they don't know. They don't remember. Look it up, folks.
You got guys like Stan Lee that didn't believe in God. He would tell you, I don't believe there's a God. I don't believe that there's a heaven after we die. I believe that that's just it. And he would tell you that statement at the same time that he's telling you. And this magazine called the National Enquirer, everything in this magazine is truth. Every single thing that's written in here is absolute fact.
Looking at your journey of, and even Matt says at one point you were getting paid $3 a day and sleeping on the floor in Tibet and all that kind of stuff. Looking at this journey from a guy who is 130 pounds, given 24 hours to live, to climbing the hardest freaking mountain in the world. The full circle, going back to that guy in the bed, besides the doctor telling you to pray, what advice the day before would you have given yourself?
The advice that I would have given me the day before, if somebody would have told me this, would have been the same advice I give people over the phone every single day, and that is that you don't need to suffer like this. There's absolutely no reason to be suffering the way that you're suffering. There are holistic methods, treatment and methods that will teach you how to overcome this very easily. Overcoming mental illness and substance abuse issues, quitting the use of a drug or alcohol is the easiest thing that anyone will ever do. Putting the disease, the behavioral side of a disease called addiction, into remission takes work, really hard work. But if I could show you a path to a better life through work, and it didn't come with the suffering, the suffering that you're doing today was left behind, would you be interested in following me? The answer would have been absolutely yes. Like, I don't know how to stop this. Somebody who's somebody's in an active addiction, who's using alcohol or drugs every single day to excess, does not have the dubious luxury of stopping today. They don't. Most of them would die from just stopping. If they're opiate addict or alcoholic, they would place themselves in great danger by just stopping the use of the drug or the alcohol that they're consuming. They would most likely be putting themselves at risk of stroke or heart attack, heart failure, potential death. It happens every day in a chronic withdrawal. So these people don't have the luxury of that. And I knew that. And every alcoholic addict knows that. And so if somebody would have grabbed a hold of me and said, "Hey, Cord, you don't have to suffer like this anymore. I have a way for you to stop suffering," I would have said, "Please, teach me, take me. What do I need to do?" Right? Because I'm stuck. I can't stop the madness of this, the chaos of it.
Cord, let me ask you, it's interesting. you've figured out that you had an addiction, or the disease, and some people who are alcoholics, they turn to cigarette smoking or eating, as a transition from one addiction to another. But we understand that you're extraordinarily successful as an entrepreneur, and could that have been another addiction?
I think it wasn't the entrepreneurial side that became my addiction. Absolutely. I think you're hitting the nail on the head. My freedom really came from changing my addiction from a substance to being addicted to helping my fellow man. Right.
Yeah.
So my passion is no longer the use of a drug. My dopamine serotonin release comes from being that guy that's helping somebody and watching their life come back to normality, and watching that the spirit around them, the happiness in their life, watching them smile and be happy. It's just something you don't want to miss if you have an opportunity to do it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good to hear. I love that. That's good.
You brought up some of the therapy that you're using, the magnet therapy in the brain. Can you elaborate on that for people that don't know anything about that?
Yeah. TMS, let's talk about that. TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, is the most miraculous tool that has ever been developed for the treatment of major depressive disorder. We use a machine called Neurostar from a company called Neuronetics exclusively, because Neurostar has 41 patents on this machine and the technology, because they are they are the front runner on FDA approvals on other markers. So as we speak, the markers that are approved by the FDA are major depressive disorder, anxious depression, anxiety and depression, and OCD. And that machine uses an MRI strength magnetic pulse to stimulate an area deep in the brain called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex of your brain, where your dopamine engine's at, and the engine that regulates mood resides. And all those receptors coming off of that area of the brain, that motor threshold of the brain, are not functioning correctly. There's no distribution, there's no flow, if you go to a psychiatrist today and say, "Doc, I'm in a major depression," and he says, "You got major depressive disorder. You're suicidal. We got to put you on a dopamine inhibitor. Let me give you this." And you were to take that a step further with him and say, "Well, what is it going to do? I need to understand this." If you were smart enough to say, "I need to understand this," he's going to say, "Well, there's an area of the brain, it's called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and it's not really functioning correctly. And we're going to give you this drug, and it's going to open up these receptors and allow this to function." So the same thing, it's not repairing anything, where TMS actually repairs. It opens up the blood flow and it repairs. It's physical therapy for that dorsolateral prefrontal cortex area that regulates mood, depression, anxiety. It's a miraculous tool, and one that should be embraced by insurance instead of argued against, because it's costly and expensive. The other thing I love about it is that there are currently 3 indications that we know: depression, anxiety, and OCD, that are treated with our machines. It's an everyday treatment, once a day, and you have to have 36 treatments is the protocol. But there are other markers in front of the FDA, and some of them, if I could tell you what they are, which I can't because of the NDA that I have, but if I could tell you what they are, it would blow your mind. That are actually going to come online, where TMS is going to treat other areas of the brain using an MRI strength magnetic pulse to stimulate or provide physical therapy to an area of the brain that needs it to repair itself.
It's interesting. I had a pharmacist at one of the universities I work with who's very much into holistic care, and she had a friend that was a medical doctor out in California, and this must have been about 15 years ago, that uses TMS, magnetic therapy on a lot of traumatic brain injury patients, autism, ADD or ADHD, and they were having remarkable results. In fact, the guy that was also working for this doctor was in a horrible military explosion, and there was a image of his vehicle, and he had all this. He was in and out of jail and alcohol and drug abuse and everything, and he had the magnetic therapy done, and it wasn't like a sudden experience where, oh, I feel so much better. It was one day he was talking to somebody at a bar, and the girl asked him if he wanted a drink, and he goes, no, keep telling the story that you're talking about. He became hyper focused, and then when he got home, he goes, wow, I'm not drunk.
I'm not.
I didn't even have a drink.
Somebody
So there is.
I walked away from it. That's abnormal.
Yeah, right. On one of our other shows, we talk about pulsed electromagnetic frequency, or PMF.
Yeah.
That we use for injuries of the spine and extremities. They're starting to explore how PMF could be used for brain trauma.
For brain trauma. Well, certainly the QEEG can, neurofeedback. I got to tell you, when somebody comes to one of our centers, the first thing that we do when they come through and fill out their intake paperwork is we stick them in that chair, put that machine on top of their head, get a good connection, and do a brain mapping. And we bring up a 3D image of the brain, and where we can see the model of the brain that it's identifying. And every single time, for anyone with mental illness or addiction or a head trauma or anything like that, the area of the brain that is not functioning or is traumatized will show up in bright red. And it's so fun to be able to tell them, when you get done here, we're going to do this again. And that is not going to be here, because there's your problem. And so regardless of whether they want to believe it or not, it gives so much hope to somebody to go, wow, nobody ever told me that I'm suffering from all these issues because I got a problem with this thing up here. And I always thought it was just my bad behavior, whatever. But we do brain mapping, we do TMS, we do brain mapping halfway through treatment. You can see all that red area diminish. Post-treatment, before they leave here, another brain mapping, show them the report, all levels normal, right where they're supposed to be, every single patient hitting the same goals. And we send them on their way and just say, hey, 6 months from now or a year from now, when you fall down and you have a little bit of a dip or a reversal in this, and you feel like you're sliding backwards, the door's open. Slide on through here. We're going to throw you back in the chair, do a few more treatments, put you right back on track. Let's go again. And we find that 3 to 5 times of doing that, if I'm willing to invest that in my patients without charging them, that this is their home, this is their go-to place, and they haven't gone back to drinking or using, but they just slid backwards, came through that door, jumped back in the chair, did a few more sessions, 3 to 5 times, then I don't hear from them. I run into some guy down the street at the Smith's grocery store at Kroger's, and I'm going, where have you been? And he goes, I've been well, man. I'm doing this and that.
When you started the addiction centers, was that the TMS, was that your main focus, or did you discover that later on, and how did you?
The main focus was the educational series on addiction. We added TMS years ago, about 5 years ago, as a therapy modality that could provide physical therapy, because we're treating them behaviorally, but we need to treat the brain because the brain has some damage to it. And so we introduced TMS. Actually, we introduced brain mapping and QEEG prior to that, using a system called Brain Master, and started doing the mapping, doing theta, therapy and doing mapping along with our educational program, we were seeing these great results in the patient journey and the outcome. Then we added TMS, and it was like everything went onto a lightning rail. It was like a lightning rod at that point because it was instantaneous gratification, which someone in that situation is looking for. So within 3, 4, 5 treatments, they were bouncing through the door, grinning from ear to ear, going, "So I don't know what's happening, but my depression is gone, and I'm here to work. I'm here to dig in because I don't know what's going on, but I want more of it." And instead of coming in for 2 days a week or 3 days a week, they were here every single day. And we were watching the success of the curve of the patient journey go from this up and down to just nothing but success on every single outcome.
Cord, I got to tell you, you're bringing back some very, very interesting perspectives that when I visited that doctor I was telling you about, this was in Newport Beach, California, and they were doing exactly what you were doing on these complicated cases. And I feel it, fast forwarded to what you're doing, it can be enormously effective and changing the way the brain actually functions biologically. I think I'm actually, now that you're embarking on it, I'm even more excited about this conversation because I believe that there's a hugely viable
I
approach
wish
here.
that every treatment center in America was using neurofeedback. I do because and they don't, because it's expensive to buy the equipment. Betty Ford's different. Betty Ford, I believe they have 18 machines at their center out here in the West. So they've embraced it. There's a lot of big organizations that are hospitals, the VA hospital in particular. Now, because of a lot of the work that we've been doing with them, they're now installing TMS machines in VA hospitals.
No kidding.
And also brain mapping and QEEG in the behavioral health units of the hospitals to treat these guys. And everybody should be doing it, I believe. It's the right continuum of care. It's the right patient care. It's the correct way to do it. Group therapy will only take us so far behaviorally. It does not change the way that our brain is functioning. We've got to get some help there. And medication, in my opinion, is not the answer.
Hey, Cord, I gotta ask a question because it's been in my head. Yeah, when you were laying in the hospital bed in Salt Lake City, and they asked you, "Do you want to contact your kids?" and you said no. What's your relation with the kids now and watching this transformation?
It's good. I mean, it's really, they work for me.
Well, there's your answer.
They didn't have anything to do with me for about 5 years, but now they all work for me.
Wow.
Well, we're tight. We have an amazing I have an amazing relationship with my children.
Now,
how was that telling the story of where you didn't want to talk to them? How was that conversation?
Oh, they've heard it. I think it was hard for them to hear the first time, but they understand it. Because they witnessed what I went through, and so they understand that. They really believed that I had a death wish back in those days, and that my desire was to just get off this planet, which was about 100% correct at that time. So they knew. Our children are very smart, very bright. They hear everything, see everything. We don't. Addiction is not something that you hide from your children. It won't work. They know. They're going to know. Addiction is a we disease. It's not a me disease. And if you have it and you're listening to this, every single person around you is suffering through the chaos of your disease. And they know everything about it. And they've already studied everything about it. And they're afraid to talk to you about it. And they shouldn't be.
So on that note, if you had 5 minutes to spend with your future self or your past self, which would you choose and why?
I would choose my past self because there's a there's a job to do here on this earth. You guys are doctors, and so you understand this. And the job to do here on this earth is not to make, our sole purpose to be on this earth is not to make millions or billions of dollars. The purpose that we're here is to learn. And what do we learn by focusing 100% of our energy on gaining wealth to get more material things? There's a limited amount of information that I can learn to do that, and I can become very good at it. But I certainly am not learning anything else by becoming a multimillionaire so that I can buy more stuff. I am gaining a tremendous amount of education, helping other people, spending my time, my money, my energy, 100% of my energy, helping my fellow man through these difficult times. I learn something every single day from every single patient that I help. They teach me something, and I can't do that. And so all the years that I spent in my past chasing the almighty dollar, living on high dollar incomes and expense accounts, didn't do anything for me other than it made me selfish. It made me dishonest with myself and my family and other people. It made me live in fear of not having more of it. And it made me live in anxiety, depression. I learned nothing from it until I hit that place of that desperation of the dying man, and then I started my education. And I wish somebody would have told me that.
Cord, based on time, we're going to enter the final phase of our conversation, which we always end with our traditional rapid fire questions. If you're prepared and ready for short answers to some of these questions that are about you, I will start with number one. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Rapid fire, baby. Here we go. Describe in one sentence the feeling you had standing on top of the world, being Mount Everest, looking down.
It was a short one. All I could think about was that somebody else had been there before me, and that person must have been the person that said, "Look what I've created for you."
Love that.
Very cool. Very good. Question number two. Name one tip that you learned from Tibet that you still use to this day other than meditation.
Other than meditation is to be patient. That patience is, they say, patience is a virtue, man. It certainly is. It's not something that you should take for granted. Slow down. Why are we in such a hurry? Slow down. Take it all in. Be patient.
So good. So good. Yeah, you seem to have that cool demeanor.
Yeah.
That's good. Best tip is question number three. Best tip that you give people who are stuck that you wish someone gave to you that would have worked.
That it is easier. It is much, much easier than you think it is. There's no reason for you to be suffering this way, and there's a path. There is a clear path to a cure to addiction. It's a spiritual one, and there is no other way. And if you're willing to open up your mind and have an open mind that may be the answer that you haven't experienced before, let me show you something that you haven't experienced before.
Nice. Question number four. Best travel story that makes you laugh.
Best travel story that makes me laugh. I think it was getting in the back of a cab in Kathmandu and leaning forward and saying, do you know how to go there? And pointing at these great big mountains, and the guy in broken English said, Jory. He said, it's the Jory Trail. And I said, great, take me to the Jory Trail. And he dropped me off in the middle of nowhere where the Jory Trail was at. And I had my cell phone with me, and I was looking at this sign that said Lukla, which was this mountain village where the airport is at. And it was kilometers, and I couldn't figure out so I Googled, miles versus kilometers, and 127 miles. And And I turned around and there was no cab there. I was alone.
Oh shit.
And you don't call a cab in Kathmandu. You just there's no 911 to call. There's no cab number to call. And I'm standing out there in the wilderness at the mouth of this trail.
Wow.
It cost me $5.